Donald Trump Jr., this is your, you said 7th or 8th trip to Dubai.
Correct.
And the last time you were here was 3 years ago.
Last time I was here was about a year ago.
Ah, a year ago.
Yeah, a little over a year ago, right before perhaps a lot of the transition period.
Just before the crunch came.
Correct.
And affected people. Well, let's start with your father, because of course he's a world significant figure in real estate. I know that he's taught you various things. What did he teach you about negotiation?
Well, you know, negotiation is an interesting topic. It's not something that can necessarily be taught. And I learned about it the hard way. I think being from a real estate company and not necessarily being the spoiled brat that many people would love to envision me as, I started working in our family company from the lowest rung of the ladder, so to speak. I started working, I was probably about 13, 14 years old, as a dock attendant at one of our Atlantic City casinos. And so I started basically hooking up electrical system, tying up boats as they came into a marina that we happened to own. So I made minimum wage and tips. And I did that for about 2 summers, and it was great because I was out in the sun and it was nice. And, well, year after that, I started working in landscaping because I think my father's logic is, you know, if you're going to dig a ditch and you're going to build a building, you should know how long it takes and have a fundamental understanding of those things as well. So I was working there, and about halfway through the summer, I said, you know, my paycheck's a lot smaller because I'm still making minimum wage, but I'm no longer making the tip component. So I go to my father and I say, you know, why have I not gotten a raise? And his response back to me was, because you didn't ask for one. Why would I pay you more than you're willing to work for? So I learned that the hard way. Basically, you don't get anything you don't ask for. You have to be, you know, forward. Don't be afraid of that, you know, word rejection of, you know, no. And, you know, the worst case scenario, you're exactly where you were before, but it makes sense to ask. So, you know, I learned the hard way. I tried going retroactive on it. I lost that negotiation badly, but I think from a very young age, it put things into perspective that, you know, you start thinking in those terms and negotiation becomes a lot easier.
Well, in this economy, a lot of people are having to negotiate and kind of re-evaluate negotiations that they did before. What's your advice in those kind of situations?
Well, I think, you know, my advice is there's no advice. You have to look at it from an individual scenario. I mean, I think, you know, again, going back to what I was saying, you don't get anything you don't ask for. I think that would be my advice to a buyer today. You know, try for it, because you'll probably get it, because, you know, people do have to move inventory. There is such a glut of supply around the world that you're probably able to make a much better deal than you ever would have thought feasible. Again, just don't be afraid to ask. For developers, perhaps the converse is true, but you also have to have an understanding of reality and where the world actually is. I think, you know, the days of thinking that you're going to sell, you know, average building sellouts at $3,000+ a foot anywhere, you know, it's over. It doesn't exist anymore. So you have to get back in tune with reality. You have to understand where you can and can't make a deal, and be willing to not just try to squeeze blood out of a stone hoping to get 1 more cent. It's more important to make deal and create velocity, because I think that'll set the tone for your project. If you're the first person to be moving inventory, you're the guy that's recognized as being the person to make deals, you know, that will beget other deals and other consumers coming in trying to make those same deals.
Do you see an application of that to the situation in Dubai today?
I think very much so. I mean, again, to the buyer, it's the same thing. If you want, you know, if you were looking at Dubai before, and I was talking to some people who are, you know, big New York business guys that do a lot of work here. I actually had dinner with them last night, and their logic was like, wow, I was going to buy at this project for $2,000 a foot. I can probably buy that same unit for $500-600. You know, it starts to make sense. You know, that's a pretty significant drop, but it's the reality of the situation. So from both perspectives, you know, it doesn't make sense for the developer to hold on to product indefinitely, because they're up against an interest clock and all sorts of other timelines, and it's probably the time for those guys to just try to make a deal as well. So I think the situation is, although I hate to generalize, I think it's very applicable in Dubai. I think it's very applicable throughout the world. It really always is. It's just a question of who has the leverage and where and how to utilize it.
I've heard you say that over the past 3 years, the Trump organization has not made equity deals.
Correct.
But recently, a few months ago, you said, I think 4 or 5 months ago, you again came in with equity on something.
Correct.
Are you preparing to come in with equity again here in this market?
You know, I think, again, this is, as I said in my speech, while we're very good at what we do in our world, we don't have the hubris to assume that we can do it everywhere. I think there may be a time for that, but I think we're likely to stick with our license model for the time being because it makes the most amount of sense. Because we don't have the ultimate grasp of the political risks, the development risks, in this market, or frankly many of the other emerging markets that we do, in America or in our own backyard. So it's great to see that we are starting to put capital back out because we're picking up things. We're doing it. Our primary asset class right now that we've been picking up stuff is in the golf and resort world. It seems to be where the valuations have come into tune. I don't think it's there yet in the commercial real estate world or even residential for that matter in the U.S. But I think the golf, we're picking up golf courses and entire resort developments that people put 50, 60, $100 million in for 10% of that original valuation. So it seems like a pretty good deal for us at the moment, but only time will tell.
If somebody else is a potential investor in golf and those kind of properties, what areas of the world would you point them at?
Well, it's difficult because I hate to generalize across markets. Again, you have to look at the individual asset. That said, I think there's something that we're able to do when we acquire a property of that nature that others can't do, right? When Donald Trump buys a golf course or resort development and he calls it Trump National, whatever it may be, there is a cachet that goes along with that. People will say, wow, the existing membership wants to stay. New members flood in. They're willing to pay a premium. They're willing to pay higher dues than if Joe Smith did it and it's the same course it was last week. It's one of the great kind of natural advantages that we have in doing these things. That's why for the bank to take over that asset, it doesn't make sense. They're willing to get rid of it off their books because they know they can't do what we can do. So we can turn a course that's not performing for the developer. We can take that same course and it can be cash flowing in a few months positively, covering all its debt service and then some because of the subtleties that we're able to bring to the table.
Last question. When is your next trip to Dubai?
Hopefully soon. I think as we get closer and as we start to kind of call the bottom and start talking about our project again, I think that's when we're going to ramp up and we'll probably be here a lot more often again.